I've been really thinking about the foods that I grew up on, that I have transitioned into plant-based. Potatoes are vegan by nature, by default, especially if marketers get a hold of it. But I don't put dairy milk in it. And I remember my mom would make mashed potatoes. So that already was, icing on the top because I just love them. But usually the next morning we'd have potato pancakes. And I just was in love with that. I just thought it was the best thing, that caramelized outside and then you broke into it and it was creamy and delicious. And you can do the same thing with this recipe. Although I'm raw vegan right now, so everything I'm sharing with you is just the variety of foods I eat without cooking anything over 118 degrees. Because when I tell people that I'm raw vegan right now, and I always eat a high raw diet, but at this time of year, coming into a new year and a new season and getting ready for spring and bikini season, there are just things I've done in my life, and it really works for me. And we all have what works for us. So I've moved to cauliflower, and cauliflower, I love cauliflower. Um, it did go to college. I don't know that joke about cauliflower and broccoli. Um, so cauliflower in my world can be used a lot of different ways. And for this recipe, it states 3 cups of cauliflower florets. And so that's about a medium small, kind of a small cauliflower head, because you're going to lose a lot of volume. But don't throw that away, because you can rice it down and have a cauliflower rice from the stalks versus the florets. You can blend it together. But since we're focusing on the florets for this dish, don't throw the stalks, don't even throw your leaves away if they're in good shape, because you can saute those and add it to your dish like you would any other leafy greens. They're very delicious, kind of sweet, not too bitter, not as bitter as, say, chard or kale or even collard greens, which I love. So, my concept is I'm going to make these mashed potatoes with cauliflower, and I'm going to use macadamia nuts. Earlier in the cashew deal cream, obviously I use cashew, but I also use pine nuts. If you don't have a nut intolerance, then we're good to go. If you do and you want to know something else, just send me a DM or a message here on Kitch and I'll give you another option. But in the recipe instructions, it says to blend the macadamia nuts down so things will incorporate easier, because this is going to add the fat. We are using some extra virgin olive oil. If you're abstaining from expeller pressed oils, you can still do this um, without that. Easy enough. There's fat here. It just gives a little bit of a different mouthfeel. And since I attended a raw vegan culinary school, and I've worked in 2 raw vegan restaurants. So there's just some techniques that I'm so used to using to just finesse and really make the dish luxurious. So when I serve it to you, one thing with vegetables, they have a lot of water. So I find if people aren't really paying attention to the water content, things will taste either watery as they sit because you're breaking them down, and they'll taste watered down, so your seasonings get very diluted in the process. So there are some things we do. So the macadamia nut is going to give body to it and give the fat content that we want, because the cauliflower is very low fat. So the 3 cups of florets I took and quickly just pulsed, because I wanted to show you this is now what we would call cauliflower rice. So instead of, if you don't want to eat rice or you're trying to get away from, certain simple carbs, this is a great way to go. You can make a tabbouleh with this. That would be delicious. So it's just riced. We've riced it, and that just means I've put it in the food processor and pulsed it. But sometimes I'll put it right into my blender. I just wanted to show you different ways you can do things with vegetables, and it's easier to show than talk about, oh, you could also, because now you have the visual of, oh, that does look like rice. And you could add, once we make the cauliflower mash, If you wanted to try the pancakes, you could just add a little bit of all-purpose flour or gluten-free flour. Like a fourth of a cup probably is good enough to what your mix is, and try making the pancakes. I'll do that when I get back to cooking over 118 degrees, but they're really delicious. So let's get started. I've got my cauliflower, 3 cups that we're going to use. I've got my macadamia nuts. You could use cashew if you like. I know macadamia nuts are a little bit more expensive, so I like to give you options. The realm that I mix, or the trilogy for me, is like cashew nuts, macadamia nuts, and pine nuts. So those three I'll interchange like I did earlier. I use the cashew nuts with the pine nuts for the white pepper cashew dill sauce that went on kelp noodles, that could go on zucchini noodles, that could be used as a dip. So check that out. So what we're going to do is, I want to be mindful. In the recipe, it says 1/3 cup of water. So I want to put that in my vessel first, but I'm going to put just 1/4 cup to start and see if I really need that last bit, because I don't want to get a soup. You could make a beautiful cauliflower soup. I could make a raw vegan cauliflower soup, and you could make a soup and heat it if that's what you like, and it'll just be delicious. The next thing I'm going to put in, though, is my macadamia nuts. And we're adding a little bit of garlic powder to this. You could also use raw garlic. I just don't want that sharpness of the raw garlic that we get in this particular dish. We're going to use a little nutritional yeast, which is easily found in most stores today. It has a cheesy kind of flavor, is rich in vitamin B. So that's something. There was a time when I'd go and it would be in the supplement area. And so I'd have to go over where the vitamins and all were and get it. And that was fine. But I think now plant-based has expanded so much, the stores and manufacturers realize, oh no, put it also, usually it's over by the baked goods, where the baking soda, baking powder, that kind of thing. You'll find it over there, or I'll still find it in some stores. And then I'm going to go ahead, water, and I could, if I even wanted it more creamy, and I mean, it's going to be creamy, but when I'm really going over the top, instead of using water, I might choose to use a cashew milk or an almond milk. I guess you could use any other milk you want. You just don't want it sweet or, vanilla flavored. Be mindful of that. Okay, Nina, keep it in the vessel. So let's just get that in. And I'm just going to blend that down before I add my olive oil, my nutritional yeast, salt, and garlic. We're going to fold the parsley in. If you blend the parsley in, you're going to have green cauliflower mash, which is fine. That's just not the aesthetic that I'm going for today. So I am going to blend. If you'd like to mute, I always like to let you know I will not speak over the blender while it's going, so you won't miss anything for me saying anything. If you have a different kind of a blender with a tamper, it's really easy just to, tamper it down. But this particular one doesn't, and I used a different vessel than my one that circles around. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add, based on how this texture is looking, the rest of the water. So that's a full 1/3 of a cup, as the recipe calls for. But sometimes vegetables, the great thing about vegetables is they might have more water or less water. I find that often. That's why I've learned to be mindful of that and not just follow a recipe until I get to know it and get to know what my produce is doing at that particular time and season. this is coming along nicely. It has a nice body. It's not too watery. I want to make sure that it's not watery for sure. So, a couple of things. We're going to add our olive oil in. And our nutritional yeast, our garlic powder, sea salt, and our white peppercorns. So I have white peppercorns here. Like I said, I wait till I'm going to need them, and then I just blend them up a little bit. Since this is a white pepper cauliflower mash, I am going to use, for this amount, I'm going to use a whole teaspoon. And white peppercorns, as we discussed yesterday, are the mature peppercorns that come from the same plant as green and black peppercorns, the Piper nigrum. But they've been washed, rinsed to remove the black skin, so that makes them much milder. You have a very earthy, warm flavor that comes up. It's not as pungent and powerful and kind of hits you in the face as black peppercorns. And the other thing why I might choose to use my white peppercorns is that I am making a white mash and I may not want the black specks showing. So there's the aesthetic aspect of it, and that's just something in the restaurants we can be very particular about, especially when you have like a white cauliflower soup or a mash or even mashed potatoes. We want to keep that color very consistent, but we also don't want, depending on what you're making, the pungency to come through as strong. So that's where it lends to have white peppercorns, because it's a really nice flavor profile and it comes up a little slower than black peppercorn. So you can start, I really like white peppercorn. So this is going to be a part of my dinner. So I know I really want it peppery. If you're not sure, start with half of what I'm saying. I think in the recipe I actually said go with half a teaspoon of your white peppercorn. And remember, when you grind it down, you may get more yield than when you took out, say, a teaspoon or a half teaspoon of the peppercorn. So just don't automatically dump it all. Measure it out. Otherwise, you'll be surprised. It'll be delicious, but just check it out before you jump right into it. Okay, so I am going to take, the recipe says or calls for a half teaspoon. I'm going to take a whole teaspoon. But what I have in here from measuring out a teaspoon of the peppercorns and then grinding it down, I almost have 1 3/4 teaspoon now, with what's left in here and this. So again, be mindful and measure before you just dump it all thinking, well, that's what it is. Because remember, we've now broken it down. So it's very aromatic. And yeah, I don't want you to say I didn't tell you. If you've not used, different peppercorns, because I talk with a lot of people, or when I'm working with people, when I'm cooking for people, when I'm teaching people how to cook, they're like, I can't recall when I've had it. But there's a purpose for each of them. So every day I'm going to show a recipe that makes sense for why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, I'm going to blend again. So if you'd like to mute, just go ahead. just going to stop and push the food that is getting on the sides of the wall down, so I make sure I have a nice incorporation of all the ingredients. It smells so delicious. Okay, let's see. Oh, it looks beautiful. So I've got this nice mash. It's got a nice body to it. And if you'd like it a little thicker, I would then just not add that rest of the water that I did. But this is a nice consistency for how I like my mash. And everybody's slightly different, I know. But it's very creamy. I don't want to miss any. So you can tell we get everything in the kitchen also. Because at the prices today, we're not trying to leave anything to be rinsed. But okay, that's enough of my OCD. So we'll put that there. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold in I just rough chopped my parsley. You could add, if for some reason you didn't have any fresh parsley, you just have dried parsley, you could add that. It's just going to be a different level of flavor and texture. But I really like the way it comes together versus, for me, blending it all up and then having green mashed potatoes. If you got a green cauliflower, well, that would happen, right? But even blending the parsley in, it would stand out from that lighter green. So here we have this nice mash. And it is ready to serve right away. Sometimes I'll put it, since I'm doing raw vegan, I'll put it in the dehydrator for about 30 to 60 minutes. It's not ice cold by any means, but if I want to just give it a little bit more warmth without heating it over 118 degrees so all the enzymes remain intact, I can do that. And a lot of times people go, wow, this is, it really then tastes just a little bit more like it's been cooked with heat. And then I just put it in a serving bowl and garnish it with parsley, or you could add other herbs such as dill. Tarragon would be really nice in this, or some edible flowers. And it's great. For me, I would have it with mushrooms, royal trumpet mushrooms, or portobello like steak. And I do some of my leafy greens if I was going for a whole meal, because I had lunch earlier with the white peppered cashew dill kelp noodles. I'm a little full, so I have to run out and do some business. So I'll come back and I'll probably just have a bowl of this, and I'll be very content and happy. But I know that's not most people. When I started eating plant-based, I was like, oh, I'm going to starve. I have such a voracious appetite. And in a couple of weeks, what I realized, because there's so much fiber in the produce and just all the meat, the food, whether it's grains, the nuts, the seeds. Um, I get full fast, especially eating whole plant-based foods, making it from scratch. So at first, because I was bodybuilding and that's how I was competitively natural bodybuilding, that's how I came into becoming vegan because one day my body just didn't want any form of animal flesh and I had to figure it out. And the person I am, I always figure it out. So I figured it out. And over 20 years later, here I am loving cauliflower mash and so many other things that I've shared with you.